What up, guys? Welcome to the podcast today. We've got a competitor from Great Britain on the podcast with us today, Owen Livesey. It was a fun conversation with him. I knew a little bit about him because I've seen him a bit, but it was super interesting, and we talk about just jiu-jitsu. He's actually comes from a judo background and some other stuff, and so we get into just talking about grappling and some ideas. This one, what I found interesting about this one is if you it felt like very much you could tell he was very like comfortable in himself.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I was just having a conversation with a guy at like me and another black belt or another high level grappler having a conversation with each other as we would if we were sitting down having a beer together. It's very much like that. So when you hear the conversation, there's lots of little interesting tips, takeaways, and things like that that you could implement for your own training, if whether you're a competitor or not a competitor, and even for some of you guys that are coaches, like he's a coach now, full-time coach, and he's still competing at a higher level. So again, some interesting takeaways there. So hopefully there's some stuff that you can take away for your own jiu-jitsu. And so hopefully enjoy the podcast. Real quick, we're going to get into our normal reads and advertisements, right? The stuff that helps keep the podcast going that, that a lot of you guys take advantage of. So by the way, thank you guys that do take advantage of some of these discount codes and things like that, because it really does support the podcast and helps us out. But anytime we get like fun messages, I say fun in the air quotes, basically like nasty messages, I always enjoy like looking at the comments. I find them interesting. So there were 2 reviews that got left for us. By the way, if you guys are on Apple or any of the other podcast things that they allow reviews, give us a good review if you think we earn it, right? Would love to have it. And again, that helps us out as well. But we got this one. It says content is okay, but ... says, quote, 12 minutes of advertisements every podcast, and again, it's like, well, if you guys have ever listened to the reads, these are very loosely called advertisements, right? A lot of times it's me talking about something and then we ramble on about some of the thing. Now, the next review afterwards, by the way, guy gave us 1 star, so screw him. The next one was a 5-star review. It said, my favorite podcast. It says, quote, I am new to BJJ. I started following jiu-jitsu on YouTube, and which has led me here to the podcast. It's really awesome. The hosts are informative and really easy to listen to. So thank you so much for your positive review. And again, if you guys want to help support the podcast and fight against people trashing us, then, let them know. Give us a 5-star review. Now, that said, let's get into some of those 12-minute advertisements. So I'll make them as quick as I can so that you guys don't have to be bored to tears.
I will say, let me say this. We've been asked to do mid-rolls, and then what mid-roll is like, we'll be doing in the middle of a podcast, and they'll say, companies will ask us to,
in the middle of the podcast,
stop the podcast and put in an ad read, because those tend to do a little better, because people are already listening. I refuse, and Chewy and I talk about this, and we refuse to do that. At least at this point in the game, I'm not going to do it, just because I'll say this. Like, if you don't want to listen to the ad reads, obviously they support us. The people that the sponsorships are very, they allow us to do what we do, spend our time doing this thing. However, just skip past them.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome to skip past them.
And also, one of the things that we have is kind of a, we've talked about this before, we don't have any of the advertisements for products that we don't use.
Yep.
Which again, our first sponsor, Charlotte's Web, is a product that we both use, have been using for several years. And it's a product that, we encourage people to try. I don't encourage anybody to use anything, but I encourage you to try stuff, because ultimately your experience with supplements and everything else is going to be different. Like, it's like one of the things where if you think about this, we talk to lots of different high-level jiu-jitsu practitioners on this podcast. And one of the things that you will hear from them is that none of them have the same regimen, the same training style, the same anything style, right? Everything is very different. It's unique to them. And again, we're all like this. And so I encourage people to try things. But again, whether or not it works for you, that's up to you. But I encourage people to try Charlotte's Web, the CBD product, because I think CBD it's a really useful supplement for recovery. That's generally what I look at it for. And so if you're one of those people that's trying to, tweak and try to get the most out of recovery as possible, sleep, diet, all those things are going to be your biggies first. But if you're going to get into supplements, CBD can be a good one to try, whether it be the tinctures, the gummies, or even the balms that you can use in your muscles. They also have a version that is usable for people that get tested. That is their daily sports edge. So whether or not you want to use the original, or if you're worried about THC concerns for getting tested, they've got you covered there as well. Do your research on it, of course. But if you guys want to check out any of Charles Webb's products, you can go to charleswebb.com, and then you can use the promo code Chewjitsu20. That's CHEWJITSU 20, and that'll give you 20% off your order. Supports the podcast. And then my encouragement to you is, if you try it, stay consistent for a month, see how it feels, and then from there, make your own assessment as to whether or not you want to continue. Also, thanks to our other sponsor, Epic Roll. Epic Roll is a jiu-jitsu gear and apparel company. I always kind of like sort of struggle with it. Like, what do you call them? Because they have a wide array of stuff. They have everything from basic t-shirts, like the one that I'm wearing right now, which is basically like a
submission seek and find.
It's a submission. Is that a seek and find? Is that what it's called?
Or no, like a word. Is it a word search?
What is a word search? What do we call those? I remember we used to do them as a kid.
It's a word search.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
sure.
So,
where you get like all the little letters.
Seek and find's like, where's Waldo type thing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it could be a seek and find. Well, anyway, he's got cool t-shirts. He's also got gis, rash guards, shorts, fanny packs, hoodies, the whole thing. So, I mean, he's got everything related to jiu-jitsu. And again, if you're interested in getting some good quality stuff that'll last, that is comfortable, and also has cool designs, then I encourage you to check out his website at epicrollbjj.com. And the promo code for that is Chewjitsu for 15% off. And again, every one of these codes, by the way, is Chewjitsu. So CHEWJITSU. I say that because recently someone tried to use a code and they thought I said Jiu-Jitsu, but all the codes are going to be Chewjitsu, and they sound very similar to each other. Also, thanks to Manscaped for helping support the podcast. Recently, they just sent me and him the Beard Hedger Pro Kit, which has got, it's got the Beard Hedger, which has an adjustable trimmer there, like
a little dial.
The dial, you can dial it in instead of having to change the guards over and over again. Because when I used to use another beard trimmer, I always had to change the guards, and so you'd have multiple, right? Which isn't that big of a deal, but it's kind of nice. I'm going to try it out. My beard right now is in need of trimming, so you can adjust the guard down, and then you can hit the beard in different areas at different lengths. So it's kind of interesting. So I want to try that out. And they've also got beard balms and shampoos and stuff like that. And again, I've never used any of those products before. I've never used a beard balm, never used a beard shampoo. I've used beard oils sometimes because they smell good, but not that much. So I'm going to give it a try, and I'll let you guys know what I think about it in my bearded opinion. But like I've said before about their stuff, if it's like anything else that they make, it's probably going to be pretty good. Like all their other products that I've used have all been top notch. So I'm kind of excited to use it. So I got to get a haircut probably tomorrow, and I will trim my beard on my own, and I'll see what that looks like, and I'll let you guys know the results. But that said, if you guys want to check out their Beard Hedger products or any of their stuff, they are the premier men's grooming product company. They have a lot of different stuff. Originally, it was all about trimming your balls and all that stuff. Now it's basically head to toe. Anything that you need to be a more well-groomed man is a good idea. And one of the things I thought about too is, isn't it interesting, these like, and this is not an advertisement. By the way, if you want to go check out their stuff, go to manscaped.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off the order and free shipping. Great deal. But one of the things I was thinking about, this is just sort of on a random tangent, is how like these different phases of like in our society happen, where like I remember when I used to see pictures of my grandfather was like, he like when he's young, he dressed so sharp. Like I remember he had a suit on, and he like had his hair all done, and it was like they had military leave, and so these guys are all getting all dressed up nice, and they're going out and stuff, and you looked at the way that they presented themselves when they were going out, they looked great. And then like the late 80s and the 90s, God, dude, it's like everybody just looked like they woke up out of bed. Like it was just like the younger culture, I guess they rebelled against that. And so everybody looked really sloppy. It looked terrible. Their hair is messy. They're wearing baggy clothes. I mean, it's like you look like you just didn't even
it's kind of the rebellion, right? It's kind of like you're rebelling against the status quo, or, and then everybody looks a certain way, like the grunge era, everybody wears like, holes in their jeans and stuff. And then people start to dress a little nicer or clean up
and that's what I was going to say is like now where we've gotten back to this thing where you don't have to dress nice all the time, but you can, and it's not weird. Like back in the 90s, if you were dressing nice, you'd be like, what's going on? Whereas like now you can dress nice and it's completely okay. And guys take care of their hair and stuff like that, because I felt like for a while, it was like, if you were a guy and you were trying to like put yourself together, oh man, what's wrong with you? Being kind of effeminate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas that used to be the norm. Like if you go look back at like how like well guys like groom themselves back in the day, like it was a thing. You even look at like the old advertisements from back in like 30s and 40s and 50s. I mean, like guys grooming was a thing. And then now that's coming back where it's like, hey guys, get your shit together.
Yeah.
Like stop looking sloppy. You don't need to look sloppy. There's no reason for it. It doesn't make you effeminate. It makes you like, get your stuff together, Yeah. And so I like that trend. I think it's a good idea.
Sure.
I'm okay with it. And so again, if you want to get your stuff together, you can do so with Manscaped's products. Also, guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to the patreon.com/the Chewjitsu podcast, along with tons of content extras, including some clip from this podcast with Owen. We also have clips from every guest that we've ever had on the podcast that could be useful for your jiu-jitsu. We also have a section of basically it's a bonus where you join in and you'll have access to it immediately in the members area. It's a warm-up routine, stretching routine that Eugene put together. And then also it's a seminar series that I did a few years ago that goes into gi and no gi techniques. You get access to both of those. For me, I think that for a lot of people in jiu-jitsu, one of the things that would be really useful to you is the warm-up routine, because it's mainly stretches and strengthening exercises in some target areas for jiu-jitsu. A lot of people that get into jiu-jitsu are really inflexible. They're tight. They sit at desks all the time. They have really tight hips. They have tight shoulders, all these things, the normal naggy areas that most people have that from modern living that also relate to jiu-jitsu. Eugene has a little warm-up routine that goes into those areas. And again, I think it can be really useful. So to me, it's worth the price of admission just to get that. But then on top of that, you also get access to everything else that we release to it on a regular basis. And guys, if you want to join my daily email newsletter, which is slowly, I think, becoming the Chew on This email, because I try to give you an idea to chew on for the day, right? That's the idea, is basically, I can't necessarily teach you some amazing new technique through an email, right? But through the text, I can say, hey, here's an idea that could serve you. Here's a way for thinking differently that could be useful to you. That's the idea. So an idea to chew on. And if you want to get the daily email newsletter, then go to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. Upon joining, you will get access to a couple free resources. Some of them will be going away in the near future, switching. I'm going to be doing a few different things on my website. But for right now, you get several free resources, including a jiu-jitsu game plan where you can put your game plan together for an upcoming competition, or just to have a better idea of how you roll in the gym. And again, you can get the resource, you can keep it, and you can unsubscribe from the email list at any time. So guys, with that said, we are done with those advertisements. If they upset you and you want to get online and complain about it, that's okay. That's your right to do so. But for the rest of you guys, let's join in and let's listen to Owen.
Yeah, I want to see what's the Polaris. What is the date? I was trying to look that up actually.
It's the 11th of March.
March 11th. Yeah. And you go against Chris Weidman.
Yes. Yeah. So,
what did you think when they offered you that?
Like, I was buzzing, mate. Like it's great for me, innit? It's like I've just got my own gym now. I'm like, I train relatively hard. Like I used to be a full-time athlete for judo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mad story. Like when I actually stopped doing judo, the reason I stopped doing judo, in the UK, you don't make money out of judo whatsoever. So I was a full-time athlete for like the best part of 10 years, and genuinely made zero money. And I started getting towards like 27. I was thinking like, I've been doing judo since I was 8, but I went full time when I was like 16. So I've been like in and out of full time for a very long time. And because of that, I never had many qualifications to my name. So I had zero idea what I was actually going to do once judo had finished. And that started hitting me when I was about 27. So like after I failed to qualify for Rio 2016, I got offered a job as a wrestling coach for a rugby league team where my gym is now in Hull. So I moved across to Hull and then started teaching wrestling.
To a rugby team?
For a rugby team, yeah. So like in rugby league, have you watched rugby league?
Yeah, I've seen it before.
I've watched Yeah, I've watched it before.
It's a lot of tackles and
like
stuff. Yeah.
Rugby league, they put a big emphasis on wrestling now. So like basically, if I tackle you in a game of rugby, you then play the ball. So if I can make that play the ball as slow as possible with like good basics of wrestling, like controlling on the floor, then all my teammates are able to get back and get set. And obviously, defensive line's better off the back of it. So I took this job because I had no other options. And then whilst I was working, I opened my own gym in Hull, which just really kicked off. And then that ended up being a full-time gym. So I've got rid of my job now. I just run the gym full-time, train with everybody in the gym. So I just started dabbling in a bit of grappling and competing, and it just went pretty well. I ended up getting to ADCC Worlds. And then obviously Polaris, I've been on Polaris like 4 times now, so this will be number 5. And when they offered me like a few like pretty ridiculous names, really, they're all UFC fighters. So like for me, an exposure for the gym and that, it's absolutely perfect.
Who'd they offer you? Can you mention some of the names?
Yeah, like they said Yoel Romero first.
Nice.
Which would have been fucking insane. And then they said Cowboy Cerrone. They said Kevin Holland, and then they said Chris Weidman. So yeah, I said yes to them all. Like it's just grappling in it. So I was excited about them all, and lucky enough, Chris took it.
Is there so doing judo? Did you do any other like martial arts while you started judo? Like did you do some submission grappling or jiu-jitsu while you were actually really heavy into judo?
Yeah, so like I was really lucky, to be honest. It's like genuinely when I first started judo, the club I was at is a very successful club. Like it's a club in a very small town in England called Earlstown. No doubt you wouldn't have heard of that place. Like it's a very small place in England, but this was the club I started at, and from the beginning, we'd basically do judo on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We'd do freestyle wrestling on a Tuesday, Thursday, and we'd do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on a Sunday.
Oh man, that's awesome.
So I had it pretty good from the start, yeah. Then when I went full time, obviously it was a massive focus solely on judo. But then a Carlson Gracie team started sharing the same venue as us. So our judo coach basically told us we had to join in with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is why I'm graded under Carlson Gracie, and I trained with them for like 8 to 10 years.
Wow. Yeah, I was wondering because when you said your background was primarily judo, I had watched your matches and I was like, man, this guy, like, he's got some good wrestling, good jiu-jitsu. Like, so I was surprised because usually if you see a guy come straight from judo into submission grappling, there's definitely some like hiccups there, but like yours, it all seems to pretty much blend together. It looks like you wrestled a ton. So
yeah, like I said, we trained wrestling, but I was just lucky because I think judo now has changed a lot because of the rule changes.
Yeah.
Now because they took leg grabs out and things like that, you're not allowed to grab the legs anymore.
Yeah.
So I think if you solely started just judo now, it wouldn't really transfer that well to anything. But I was lucky when I started. It was like the old school judo, as you call it now. So it was basically wrestling with a gi on. So we would basically train judo, and some nights we just take the jackets off and we just do judo without the gi on, which is probably why it's transferring pretty well to no-gi at the minute.
Yeah, with your matches, obviously I know that the money and the sort of attention right now is in no-gi, right? But if you, let's just say you had your own, you could decide it could be this way or that way. Would you rather have a match in the gi or would you rather have it in no-gi?
Right now, I'd choose no-gi. That's for no other reason other than how the training is where I am. For whatever reason, like in this area at the minute, gi is very, very like quiet. So, like I can turn up at my gym and we've got no gi on, and there'll be 40 to 50 on the mat.
Yeah.
Every night. Whereas the gi, then it'll just suddenly drop to like 10, 12 people.
It's the same in my gym. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a thing at the minute, and it's a shame as well because I do really enjoy the gi. I would have to delve into a few of the different guards now, because I find like in the gi there's a different guard coming out every fucking week, more or less. So I think I'd probably, like, nowadays, if I just jumped in and I didn't really look it up, I think I'd end up getting stuck in one of these lapel guards and I wouldn't be able to move. So I'd have to put a bit of an emphasis on that if I was going to cross over. But definitely be something I'd be open to, because obviously, as you know, like, the majority of my training was actually in the gi.
Right. So that's why I was curious. It's it's interesting with those positions like the lapel guards. That's one of the reasons why I don't really like competing in the gi as much anymore, because you get wrapped up in there. And I think this is where one of those things where I think if the sport of gi jiu-jitsu is going to continue to go, they're going to have to start tweaking stuff. I don't necessarily think maybe go the route of judo where you start taking out huge stuff, but maybe like one of the things that judo does is say, okay, like if we're in a position, we'll break it and we'll restart the match, right? So I think some of if you get stuck in like a lapel guard, nobody's making any progression, I think it would be worthwhile to say, all right, let's just break the match, let's restart, and let's get you guys moving again.
I agree totally, because I think that's one, like, I think both sports have things that are better than the other. I think with judo, they have definitely nailed that, where if we land on the floor in judo and I'm actively attacking something, whether that be like a strangle or an armbar, they will let that carry on. Like, the full match could be on the ground if I was actively going after something for the whole match. It's just when they see you trying to run the clock down and playing tactics a little bit, they just stop that straight away and stand you up. I did a camp, actually. It was quite funny the other week. I did a gi camp. So I travelled over to the Lake District in England and ran a gi camp. And I was really excited about it because I'd not had my gi on for ages. And it was like 2 days of technique, but after every session, there was an hour of sparring. So I was jumping in and sparring with everyone. I was flying. And I was thinking, fucking hell, I'm getting a bit of an itch again for the gi. And then I fought a lad who, I think it was a worm guard. He's wrapped it around my leg and then I couldn't move and he wasn't moving either. I was like, yeah, this is why I haven't fucking done it. I had no answer.
Yeah, it's a good way to slow somebody down, I think, but it can't, like, and there's a lot of, so many different strategies and, like you said, guards and grips and things like that. But I think viewer wise, like, I think where the money is in gi, because it's more exciting, there's more movement. But like you mentioned, I think, and like you mentioned, Chewy, is like, I think if you add those, like, hey, 30 seconds, you're not moving, you're not progressing or advancing, let's stand it up. And that could be from either position too. If you're on bottom, just holding on to someone and you're not going attacking for things, then that's the same thing. I think it can make it more exciting, but yeah, people get really good at wrapping people up, and then it's kind of stagnant. You're just watching two people stay in one position.
That's it, yeah. So I think MMA has made no-gi a lot bigger as well. I know we have people coming in the gym, and it's just the ease of for no-gi. They don't need anything. Like, especially the town where we are with this gym, it's a pretty working class town. A lot of people play rugby first. So if they were to come in the gym and they were like, well, what do I need for training? And I was like throwing a gi at them and then trying to teach this man who's worked all day how to tie his belt. It's like a lot of them just like the fact that they can just put a pair of shorts and t-shirt on, jump on the mat, learn some submissions, and then some of them do end up crossing over to the gi later on. But I think it's a good sport just for getting people on the mat, because they need minimum.
Yeah. And I wonder what you think about this. One of the things that I think about from the American standpoint. So, like, jiu-jitsu got pretty big here pretty quickly over the years. But one of the things when you look at, say, like, let's say like high level world champions, you could say ADCC or, IBJJF style world champions in no gi versus the gi, there's a lot more Americans who have won that. Or you can say just in a lot more non-Brazilians that have won that, whereas like the Brazilians in the gi have always dominated. And so I wondered too, especially because Americans, like, we're more likely to encounter things like wrestling and stuff beforehand. And so when you go to no-gi, it's just a little bit more natural. And so I think that, we tend to favor better in the no-gi than we do the gi. And we can also look at people and say, well, like, one of our other guys did it, so like that gives me a little bit more hope that I can do it. So I wonder maybe if there's something like that, because we've all encountered more wrestling and more like stuff like that as well.
I think it's that 100%. It's only the other day I was talking to someone in the gym about this, because in England you get no exposure to combat sport whatsoever unless you go out of your way to find it.
Yeah.
Like there's none, like in America where you can wrestle in college, and there's none of that in the UK in high school. Yeah. So like, it's just for people like in England, if they don't go out of the way as a child, like I was lucky. Like someone came in, they basically did a 6-week taster course in my school when I was like 8 years old for judo, and then my dad then took me across off the back of that. But if it wasn't for that, I'd have had no exposure to a combat sport till you're like, what are you saying, like 21 after you finish college, and then if you start at 21 to then close the gap against someone who's been wrestling since high school, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's as close as, really.
It'll be tough.
Yeah, I think that it's just you've missed out on such a big base. And obviously, like, you see kids nowadays, like, they learn so quickly. They get, like, the kids that are coming through at 14 now, I don't want to be on the mat when they're on the mat at 30. It's like, it's just it's a whole new level coming through, isn't it?
Well, imagine, like, you think about this, like, because I think about the same thing. We've got kids coming up in our program that are getting so good. And you see like lots of high level guys, like the Rotolo brothers is an example, that have been doing this stuff since they were young children. Imagine being at a time in your life where you didn't have bills, you didn't care about girls, like you didn't care about anything else. And like, instead of playing video games, you did jujitsu, right? Or instead of like going out and playing like sports, you played jujitsu. That's what you did. All your attention went through that. You had nothing else to focus on. And then you have, like, nowadays you have like information that's so readily available.
Oh, it's crazy. It's like,
bro,
if you think how long it's took you to learn certain things, like kids now walking in the gym and getting something off you day one, that it took you 15, 20 years to get. It's crazy. It's like they're coming in and within the first week, they're learning things from you that it's took you so long to gain. And I genuinely think that's why they get into like 15 years old. Like I did like a week of seminars in Ireland last week. So I travelled over to Ireland and we were just teaching seminars and sparring after. And I was just rolling with this kid, and he's like 12. I mean, he's 12 years old. And it was just like the things he was doing. I was like, you would have battered me when I was 12.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I wasn't even close to this. It's like he could wrestle. I'm putting him on his back. He's got a great guard. I'm laying him on top, and he's actively going after things on top. He's linking it all together, and he's 12. Like at 12, when I was doing judo at 12, it was like still a little bit of sparring, a little bit of technique, loads of games, like really fun. Whereas these kids nowadays, they're training like professionals already.
Yeah.
It's all there for them.
And the techniques they get are very refined. It's like when you learn a technique, or I learned a technique, it was kind of, you maybe learn from purple belt. I learned a lot from blue belts, purple belts as a white belt, and it probably was decent, but it wasn't like a black belt level technique, that somebody's got really refined and perfected. Now they're learning, basically, we're learning from, instructionals and seminars and things like that. And you're bringing that information in, and this kid shows up and he's getting like your best stuff. Like he's learning your best technique. Like it's perfect. Right. So it's just, they're getting the techniques, but also getting a really excellent version of it, which, I mean, I think they're learning it the right way.
That's it. I can't see it ending. I think some of the talent in the future, well, you can already see in the last 10 years how much jiu-jitsu and grappling has completely changed. It's
100%.
just, it's changing like yearly. It's changing so quick. It's just, there's always new things coming out. It's hard to keep up yourself.
One thing I was curious about, because we got right into it. Like, did you get into judo just because your dad signed you up, or was like grappling, was it something that you got interested in as a kid?
No, nothing. It was literally because of my dad. So like where I'm from is the little town called St. Helens. And it's just a huge rugby town. So basically every lad as a kid will probably play rugby to start with.
Okay.
Like I have a lot of friends who I did play rugby with who are now professional rugby players. I have a lot of friends who I played rugby with who now work normal jobs but still play rugby on the weekend.
It's a tough sport to play on the weekend.
Yeah, it's just built into them, mate. Like it's literally just a massive rugby town. So my dad, literally when I was doing judo up till about 17, 18, until I started getting a little bit of success, he still actually wanted me to go back to rugby. It was like, interested in the judo, but still like, but you could be a rugby player. But yeah, I stuck with it. But that was the thing. They came into my school. We did about 6 weeks of judo. And then what actually did it for me dad was the judo coach. I remember he said to me, Dad, it's really good for rugby. It helps with tackling. If that's going to make you a better rugby player, then you go into judo. So I was like, oh, okay.
Did you do both? Like, did you still play rugby and do judo kind of together?
So as a very, very young kid, I did, because I started rugby at 5, started judo at 8. We'd play rugby on a Saturday. Because I used to train, obviously, with the judo, the wrestling, and the jiu-jitsu, I'd only train rugby once a week. So I'd train rugby once a week, I'd play on a Saturday. It actually got to the point that I was training that much, like between judo, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu when I was about 14, that I wouldn't train at all for rugby, but they just still let me play on the weekend. So I stuck with the rugby as long as I could. And I was actually doing all right with the rugby. Like, I was actually on the scholarship scheme for Saints Rugby League. But then they basically pulled me in and we had a chat, and they said, if you want to carry on with this, and you got to take it more serious and drop some of the combat sports that you're doing. And I was enjoying them too much at that point, so I actually dropped the rugby, and then that's when I moved away a year or two later to then do judo full time.
Is that when you kind of came? I mean, again, obviously these things happen over like long periods of time, but is that when you kind of, I guess, had to make a decision, and then in your head you're probably like, okay, no, this is what I actually want to pursue, versus, you know, grappling sports being just kind of a fun thing to do?
Yeah, like, I think what did it for me was literally when I started judo at 8 up till about 14, 15, I literally had no success. Like, I really enjoyed it, but every tournament I did, I was just losing all the time. Like, I don't think I got one single medal until I was 14. And then when I turned 15, I got into the final of the British Championships for my age group, which was like, at the time in my head, like now I can look back and you realise as a youngster it doesn't really mean anything. It's just a learning curve. But back then in the time, like, I thought that was unreal. So then I got invited onto the Great Britain judo team. So then I was thinking, like, starting to get a little bit serious. When you get on the GB team, then you start getting like training camps paid for. So you're traveling all over Europe, competing and training with the GB team. So they call that the cadet squad, and that you're in that squad until you're 17. And that transitions over to a junior squad up to your 21, and then you're on the senior team after 21. This is a bit why, like, in our kids program in the gym, we teach a lot of judo as well as jiu-jitsu, because we try and put the kids down the judo route. Because in Britain, like, if you were to do solely jiu-jitsu in Britain as a child, there's only like domestic tournaments for you to do in jiu-jitsu. So, like, say our kids program was solely jiu-jitsu, and then we got some really good kids out of that. The domestic tournaments, they might turn up and get one match against another child their age. So in terms of like development, judo is a far better path in this country. You can get on the GB team, which automatically means they can get 5 or 6 training camps with all the other best kids in the country per year. And then on top of that, if they're in the top 3 for their weight category in the country, they get carried all over Europe, training with the best kids of their age in Europe, and they can compete in European championships for their age. So, like, I think in terms of like learning experience and getting exposure to different styles, a judo route for a child in this country for combat sports would be up there.
Yeah, well, also too for kids, I think judo and like judo or wrestling, some like takedown base is super important, because, you know, from a fight standpoint, this is like one of the things, like for like, you know, I guess in judo, I've talked to different judo practitioners. You know, if you're fighting someone, you know, and you throw them down to the ground super hard, like, I mean, that's it. Like, if it's a hard surface, like if you do some really hard throw, the person's not getting up. You know, and it's the same thing with wrestling. You can watch videos of people recording, and you watch a hard slam or a hard throw onto a, you know, concrete or some hard surface. That person, like the average person's done. So, you know, some kid has to take care of themselves at school because some bully's picking on them. You know, they may, like, I had a kid years ago, he just did a little Sotogari, but you took the kid down. The kid doesn't know how to break fall or anything. So he bumps his head, and like the bully doesn't want to mess with him anymore.
Yeah, it's I think judo and wrestling are really good sports as well for just work ethic. I think like personally, if like speaking about myself, like with grappling, I think like my work ethic and my pace helps me a lot in matches as well. I think like that's why in our gym we try and put quite a big emphasis on wrestling and stand-up work, because I think if you can kind of carry that conditioning base from them sports through to jiu-jitsu, it can do a lot for you as well. So yeah, I think it's the real good sports for kids to start in, just to build that work ethic and discipline. And yeah, that seems to serve me well anyway.
Do you think as far as team sports go, like what would you say, you got soccer, basketball, all this rugby, what do you think the best team sport is to train like that may carry over into martial arts?
See, being English, like if I'm gonna go team sport, I'd just go rugby league all the time, personally. And which is very different to rugby union as well. I absolutely hate football, which you'd know as soccer.
Okay.
Like, honestly, I hate it. Like, I think in England that sport's completely the opposite to martial arts. I just think the majority of footballers are soccer players. There's no discipline involved whatsoever. I don't actually know why that reason is and what's promoted that, but I find whenever there's a story in sport and there's a high profile athlete who's been messing about or not doing things that are good for his team, it tends to be soccer in this country. So I think it's sports that are super physical. I think rugby league, like a lot, like even when I was a kid, like rugby league, you don't get a wrestling coach, but you're all kind of wrestling as part of your training, and you just have to be disciplined, I think, because if something goes wrong in rugby, it's a very physical sport.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, isn't it? Right. Where like in sports that have dire consequences for you not, being on your game for, like you said in soccer, if, you don't do well in that game, well, the guy scores a goal or something, but, if you're playing a sport like wrestling, judo, boxing, some combat sports or rugby, and you're not on your game and you haven't been developing the right virtues and discipline necessary for what you're going to do, it's going to be bad. It's not going to be like, it's not going to just you lose. It's like going to be a lot of physical pain, possibly injury, everything else. And so, there's you're locked in that you have to develop those traits and that hard work ethic, because if you don't, it's not going to be good for you.
It's literally why I absolutely love more or less any combat sport, because I just find any sport that's individual, it's like, it's just all on you. And I absolutely love that about combat sports. It's like, if you lose, like, it's genuinely more or less no one else's fault. Like, I don't even think it's your coach's fault. I kind of think like your coaches give you everything he can. And I love that about combat sports. It's just, you get out what you put in, for me. It's like, you put a lot into it, you'll get a lot out of it. If you're half-hearted in the way that you train, you might be super talented and get away with that for a while, but when you go against someone else who's super talented, you probably get found out. And that's definitely one of my favorite sports, favorite things about combat sports and individual sports over team sports. I think some team sports you can have the worst game of your life and your team still has wins and everyone's celebrating. And inside you, and I've been there, and you're thinking, fucking hell, I played terrible today. But everyone's like, well done, mate. And you're like, well, not really. I played terrible, but we won, though. It don't matter. It's like, I'm much more towards the individual sports. And I love coaching now, mate, as well. I love trying to pass that on to other people. And I think you can kind of tell straight away as well. Like, you see people who are talented, but that carries them. And you kind of tell that person, like, look, you've got to pick up your actual work ethic, though, because it will only take you so far. And then people don't realise that until they do get, like, the first loss. And then they're like, all right, yeah, what I've got isn't enough without the hard work to take me where I want to get. And I think it makes a very honest man out of your combat sport.
For sure. That was, I think, for me, and maybe you had the same sort of thing with rugby. I played, American football, in high school and stuff, and I enjoyed it or whatever. But I remember, there was always those moments where people could point the finger at someone else for not doing their job. Hey, you didn't do this, that, whatever, and try to sort of shirk responsibility towards someone else. But then, in wrestling, it was just like you said, it was all on you. So if you stepped out there and lost, that was your loss. And then if you won it, that was all on you. It was your win. I mean, you still have your coaches and your teammates to thank, but you won that match. And, one of the things that I noticed is our football team was, we were okay. And a lot of the guys were super undisciplined. They didn't take it super seriously. And then our wrestling team was the opposite. Everybody was very disciplined and everybody was taking it very seriously. And I always liked that because, again, their ass is on the line, right? If they lose, they're going to have to own that. So they can't just point the finger at someone else. And like you said, I think it makes you a little bit more honest about the situation. Yeah. And, I always like that aspect of wrestling. To kind of go back to you about coaching, because you said you got your own gym now and everything else, and you're competing at a high level. How are you? That's always kind of that's a balancing act for a lot of people, where you're coaching and you're trying to give yourself away to other people. And then at the same time, typically when you're getting ready for a competition, you got to be somewhat selfish and really focus on yourself to make sure you're getting what you need. How do you balance those two things? And is there any sort of strategies that you sort of implement to make sure you're getting your training in for your upcoming competitions?
Yeah, to be completely honest, lifestyle and training as an athlete is not perfect anymore. But when I say perfect, I'm comparing that to when I was actually a full-time athlete and that was it.
Yeah.
Obviously my training back then was absolutely perfect. And like you just said yourself, I was super selfish back then. I would literally just train, eat, train again, go to bed, get up, and then spar in the evening. That would be like that Monday to Saturday. Whereas now I have a lot more going on. But I have carried things through me from when I was a full-time athlete, which I still live by. So basically I'll plan my own schedule every week. And within that schedule, I've got sparring sessions or rolling sessions, which I'll roll in. I have technical sessions. I've got my strength conditioning sessions, and they're non-negotiable. So I basically set myself around 12 to 14 hours of training per week, which I'll definitely complete. And then outside of that, I am solely a coach and a dad, because I've got a son now as well. So it's very hard it's definitely very hard to put it all together. I don't really have a coach now anymore either. I have a good friend of mine who was actually in the UFC called Danny Mitchell. He coaches down at my gym a night a week. So he helps me out a little bit, but I don't really have a coach anymore. I'm kind of learning areas that I need to keep working on through sparring. I travel twice a week to make sure I get exposure to different bodies, and we've got a couple of good gyms about an hour away from where I'm living. I've got some good black belts there, so I get down with them, and lucky for me, a lot of them are predominantly leg lockers. So I'm kind of finding out little holes in my game on a weekly basis, coming back to my gym, which I see as my base, working on these little holes, keeping myself ticking over my strength conditioning. I just make sure I've got my sessions in, and them sessions are all built around the sessions that I do in the gym. So when I'm actually coaching, it's not like I'm trying to split coaching and being an athlete in two. When I'm there and there's a session on the schedule for the people coming in, just solely a coach, and everything's super focused on making sure that they get what they want. It's when I first opened the gym and I had a job in Hull, I genuinely didn't have any competition in mind. I wasn't actually going to compete at all. I'd kind of content with what I'd done in judo, and I was just quite happy to be a coach. And I basically just got asked to compete on a show called Grapple Fest in the UK. Okay. And I knew the bloke at the time that was running the show, so I ended up doing it. I just jumped on. I'd basically not trained for that match whatsoever. Ended up scraping a decision. And then from there, I just kept getting asked to go on different shows, and as the gym got a little bit better, we started adding more coaching staff to the schedule. So at the beginning, it was just myself. Now we've got about 7 different coaches. We've got 2 MMA coaches. We've got 2 boxing coaches. We've got a gi coach. I teach all the wrestling and grappling, and then we've got a leg lock coach as well. We've got a separate coach who teach the women. So like, it's not just me anymore. So it's tough. It's a hectic schedule for myself, but I feel like I'm managing it pretty well at the moment. And basically, when it's time for me to train, I can put everything into that. When it's time for me to coach, I'm full on being a coach. And then in between that, I'm at home with my son.
What's been one of the most challenging things about owning a gym or running a gym for you? Like kind of growing through it, growing pains and things like that, and building, this coaching staff. Is there anything that's been really kind of difficult for you to figure out or overcome?
It's like, I do love what I do. I genuinely do really, really enjoy it, which has made it easier. Like, I really still don't see it as work. But I have found my challenges. Like, obviously, I'm sure every coach is the same. Like, you want everybody to get as good as they can be as quick as possible. Like, and I am putting the time into that. Like, I'll teach 2 hours every morning with a small group, and then 3 hours every evening, Monday to Saturday. So, like, I do put a lot of hours in with them. But as I'm sure you know yourself, if you're running the gym, it's like, we get people coming in and they want to fight and they want to compete, and then you ask them to do what you think is needed to be done.
Sure.
And then they're not prepared to do that, and then they lose, and then it's your fault, and they're asking you why they've lost. And when you tell them they haven't done what you asked them to do, then they don't accept that. So I'd probably say, like, the biggest challenge, and it still is a challenge, is to, like, try and get across to people, like, what they have to actually do to compete at a good level. I think some people like the idea of competing, but the actual reality of the lifestyle that it involves, and I think trying to get across some of the things that they've actually got to sacrifice. I don't think actually being an athlete, if you're going to be serious, it's weird. I didn't find it a very enjoyable life, but at the same time, I did, because I liked what I was doing. But obviously, there's a lot of things I had to miss out. I didn't really have a girlfriend. When I did get girlfriends, it never worked, because it was never like,
baby, I got to train.
Yeah, literally, like, there was never any negotiables on whether I was going for training or I was going to a meal that night. Like, it was always training first. There was not many nights out on weekends. It was a very strict, boring lifestyle. And I think people watch now ADCC or big events like this, or they watch the UFC, and they want that, but they don't really want to do the lifestyle that them people have lived for the last 10 to 20 years.
Right. Well, that's the thing, because like those exceptional moments, those exceptional like people, their exceptional skills built on, a life of mundane and repetitive practice. I mean, that's all it is.
Yeah.
Like you said, you've lived that life, and all of us that have pursued it at some point or another have lived it. And I mean, you sacrifice so much to try to do something to eke out some sort of existence for yourself in that space. And it's not pretty, it's not sexy. It's not like like you're living like an NBA basketball player or something like that. I mean, you're just, especially when you're getting into grappling, there's not that much money in it comparatively to other sports. And so you're scraping by and you're just training. And like you said, with your stuff, you wake up, you go train, you get done, go eat food, take a nap, get back up, go train again, take more food. And then if you've got some other time to do something, that's fine, do it. But I think another thing too is to kind of go back to what you experienced, right? You spent several years just going, doing your sport, but not winning anything.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes people get a little ahead of themselves. I mean, we all do. We get into something, and we always get into something with the idea of like, what would it look like if I was doing really well in that thing? I mean, nobody comes into jiu-jitsu or judo or fighting and says, man, you know what? I want to be really mediocre for like several years, and then that's when I really want to get good, right? But that's the reality of it, right? Like, you're going to take your lumps most of the time, unless you're really talented out of the gate. You're going to take your lumps, and you're probably going to suck for several years, and maybe you'll win some matches here and there, but you're not going to be great. And eventually it'll get better, but you have to be willing to eat that early stage of it. And that's just the way it is.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I think it takes a certain type of person. Like, that's another thing I've seen in the gym. Like, we've had, obviously, you get all sorts of characters coming into the gym, and it's like we've had a couple of occasions which are pretty funny, to be fair. And they're like, we've had a couple of like bodybuilders come in the gym, so they're like real big guys, like tattooed everywhere, shaved heads, like, and they come in, and I'm like, mate, look, first session, like, ease into it, take your time. It's a very different sport to what you're used to. And they're like, no, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. I'm just like, okay, mate, no problem. So you look around and someone's got him in mount and he's going absolutely insane. And then they like it for 2 weeks. And they realize it just does not get easier. And you've kind of got to accept that until it starts to click and you start to see improvements, or it's not for you. I think it is. It takes a certain type of person to keep coming back to the gym when they're not the best in the room. I think it's a very easy and comfortable place when you're best in the room.
Sure.
Which is why I always try, and even now, just try and travel to try and find them people that can put it on you and put you in some bad positions. Because I think once you start getting comfortable, you start getting away with things. And when you start competing against these people at a high level, it's pretty inevitable that you'll get found out for that.
Here's a question for you as a coach, because this is something I've noticed. It's not true for everyone, but it's a generalization, but it's not true for everyone. But it happens a lot. Let's say if I get 2 students, they represent kind of a general idea or general category of people. I'll get like someone that was a stud or a standout in some other sport, like football or, American football or, something else, right? And they were really good at that thing. And then I'll have like this nerdy guy that like has never really been good at much of anything. And then they'll come into the gym. And it seems like more often than not, that guy that was an exceptional standout in this particular realm, when he comes in, and I guess this maybe goes back to what you said just before, they'll quit because they all of a sudden they went from being really good at something and they were like the dude to now they're getting beat by 15-year-old kids who are just scraping them up. And that's it. And then that nerdy guy who never really expected to be good at anything because he's never been good at any sport. He's just like, I'm just here. They just keep plugging away. And then before you know it, a couple years later, you've got this guy who, in the street would be incredibly non-assuming, but like he would kick your ass if you got a hold of him, and
it's the maddest thing about grappling, that it's just there's not really any other sports like that for what you just said there. Because it's like, I don't know, I think like if you go into high level judo, there's definitely a certain look. Like everybody is super athletic.
Yeah.
He walks down the street, you'd say to him, "Oh, what sport do you do?" Like freestyle wrestling, it's very rare you get a very high level freestyle wrestler who doesn't look like he's done a bit.
Right, big thick neck and his ears and her face and everything else. So,
whereas like grappling's just, it still blows my mind. It's like you genuinely do not have a clue what that person is like until you feel for the first time.
Yeah,
it's a crazy sport for that, but I do like it because it genuinely does show that with the amount of different things within jiu-jitsu and the amount of different styles, like it really is for anyone, and there's not really a specific body type that makes you the best at it.
What about characteristic wise? You have a student walk in and you kind of start feeling them, or you see them work, come in. What is there anything that you look for that maybe will give you an inkling that they're going to be special, they're going to be talented, or they could have some potential in grappling? Is there something like some things you look for?
Do you know what, mate? Like for me, honestly, like I just want someone that was willing to work hard and always turn up. Like we ran like a scholarship day at our gym about a month ago, and it was basically, I've just offered people 1 year of free training, so they can train full time for 1 year for free. Progress Jiu-Jitsu sponsor me with all my clothes and that, so they'd put like a £400 voucher in for these scholarship winners where they could get all the training gear. I sorted them out with like a nutrition supplement sponsor, so they'd support them with that. There's loads of things in there. There's about 10 different things in there. And basically, we ran the scholarship day just to see. It was like 2 very, very physical days. And then at the end, we ended up picking 4 people for the scholarship who will then join us to train full time for 1 year. And like I just said to them at the beginning, I was like, look, I genuinely don't care if you're the best on this mat today or if you're the most talented, because we didn't put like a purple belt and above on it or anything like that. We just said scholarship day, it's open, come to the trials, see if you've got what it takes basically to get the scholarship. And I basically said to them, all I want to see is like by the end of day 2, who's still going. Because like I've seen it so many times where like someone trains and you're like, Jesus, he is very good. Like he's super talented. You can show something once and then he'll hit it on someone in sparring later on. But then, like we said earlier, like that person then says, like, I want to fight or I want to compete in grappling. So then you give them that schedule where they've got to be in daily, at best, if they can, more than once a day. And sometimes that talented person doesn't follow that schedule. And personally, I would genuinely rather have someone who's not very good, but I just don't even have to ask if they're going to be there in the morning. I just know they're going to turn up. That's genuinely my favourite characteristic in a person, is just knowing that they want it, knowing that they want it for the right reasons. And because I even think people that are in it to chase money, some people don't make money. I mean, especially in grappling, there's hardly any money in grappling anyway. Right. It's in MMA, obviously there's more incentive, but there's still people in MMA who you'd think are making really good money and they're fighting on good shows, and they're not making a lot of money at all.
That's right.
So I think it's important people are doing it for the right reasons, which is they actually just want to win things and be a good athlete. And then I think I just look for that work ethic, and I just don't think you can beat having people in the gym that you absolutely know when you get out of bed in the morning that they're going to be there. They're the type of people that kind of make me get out of bed and enjoy my job, because you see them type of people getting better every day.
Yeah, extreme talent's almost to their detriment. They're so talented, so gifted with, if you've never really needed to grind out to really kind of test yourself, you kind of get it super quick, and then you almost don't develop that work ethic. And like Chewy had said, when you are kind of used to being the nail a little bit, you're used to kind of just keep grinding just to get a little better, to gain an inch, and then you just keep showing up. And once you get good, you still stick with that same work ethic, and that's gonna progress even further.
That's it. Yeah, I think I do. I live by that. Like I just always say, like you get out what you put in. If you're in every day, you're gonna end up quite good. Like you might not end up the best, or you might not end up a champion, because not everyone can. Like I do think there's something different in that. I think that's the people that are talented and do work hard. But like what I say to everyone in the gym is like the absolute minimum I want for people in my gym. It would be like, number 1 would be to be great competitors and make some money out of the lifestyle that they're living. That would be like my dream for them. And then 2 would be like that they could be a real good coach and go and open their own gym elsewhere. Like for me, that's perfect. It's like, if you want to do it as a hobby, that's absolutely fine. But we have obviously, because our gym's in a working class place, we have a lot of people that don't really have a lot of money, and they come in the gym and they're struggling to pay gym membership. Some of them on like, sometimes there's been times when I've just said like, look, if you're really struggling, like don't pay for 2 or 3 months, and when you're back on your feet, then just carry on from where you are. Because I think that comes from like when I was doing judo. I know I was doing judo and I had no money, and people did that for me. I was making no money, so like I was basically living and training full time, and I only had to pay 50 quid a week. It was like, if I had to pay a lot of money, then I wouldn't be able to do that. And now I'm in a position where I've got a gym and I'm making relatively okay money. So it's I think that's why I hate seeing these gyms that they charge crazy membership, and some gyms are making you wear certain things, and you have to pay so much money on day one. And it's like, if I did that in my place, like 75% of my members wouldn't have even been members. It's yeah, it's just I put an emphasis on making it affordable for everyone, and it's I would love to help some of these people to a point where they could make money from this sport in some way as well, whether that be a grappler, whether that be a fighter, or whether that be a coach.
Well, let's kind of switch gears here. So, you're going to be competing against Chris Weidman on the Polaris show, March 11th. So, first of all, what's your training been like preparing for a match like that? And I guess to get started, what's the rule set you're going to be competing in first?
So Chris wanted no leg locks, which is understandable. Like, obviously, I'm guessing he's coming back fighting in the UFC, so that's obviously going to be his priority.
And he's had some knee surgeries too.
Yeah, he's had some leg surgeries, hasn't he? So it's absolutely understandable that he didn't want leg locks, and I'm not a leg locker myself, so I was absolutely fine with that. It's at 95 kilos, which is fine for me.
What do you walk at?
I only walk about 92, mate. 93.
92. Okay.
Yeah.
How tall are you?
I'm only 5'9", mate.
Okay, yeah. So you're like a thick dude, because he's like, first time I saw you, I think it was on some Polaris video. It's like this little dude is like foot sweeping people and doing fireman's carry. I was like, oh, his dude's jacked.
You know what I remember? I remember your legs. You're like your thighs.
Mate, do you know what's ridiculous? I get that off everyone. I genuinely barely train legs as well. Like, I'll squat like 4 sets of squats a week, and that is it. Like,
it's probably from those years. Dude, every rugby guy I've ever met who was like big into rugby at some point or played rugby, they had big legs, and maybe it's something with that. I don't know.
Like driving, because you're constantly driving.
Judo as well, mate. Like,
yeah, it's true.
Once they took leg grabs out of judo was predominantly just hips. It's like more or less like Greco-Roman and a gi. Right. So it's like everything you were doing was involved in picking someone up, and you basically have one support leg, and the other would be involved in some way in throwing someone. So I'm pretty sure my base and all that has just come from judo. But yeah, it's a 10-minute match, and that's it really. It's I'm guessing with Chris, obviously he was an All-American as well, wasn't he? So yeah, he's a fantastic grappler and athlete. So for me, like, my training's not changed at all. I've kept the same schedule because I do train relatively hard all year round anyway. I've just put a little bit more emphasis on my conditioning because I do see it being quite scrambly and quite a bit of wrestling in there as well. So I've picked up my conditioning a little bit, a few more wrestling rounds, a few more grappling rounds, and I like doing a bit of rowing. Like, my go-to conditioning outside of being on the mat is
rowing
machines. Yeah. Just a couple of times a week, I'll do like a long, steady one, like to work on my aerobic base, and I'll do some intervals as well. So I've brought that back in as well. I normally just pick that up about 8 weeks before competition. So other than that, I've not changed anything at all, really.
Now, do you strength train often?
Only twice a week. So I lift twice a week. At the moment, I'm rowing twice a week, and then the rest of it I just do on the mat.
Why do you like the rowing as like for cardio as opposed to like a bike or something else?
It's just like I've genuinely tried so many different conditioning. Like, I've had a few different strength conditioning coaches. Some of the conditioning I've done has been on the road. Some's been on treadmills, assault bikes, ski ergs. But I've just never felt as fit as I have on a rower for grappling for whatever reason. Like, I struggle running now because my knees are not the best. So if I do a big block of running, I get a lot of knee pain, which then starts affecting me on the mat, which I think straight away is, if anything you're doing in strength and conditioning is affecting you at all on the mat, then my opinion is to probably stop it straight away. Rowing, basically, I get no impact on anything. So I get no niggles from a rowing machine. I get no pains from a rowing machine. And at the same time, it's like, if I want to be in my aerobic zone, it'll definitely get there. If I want to be in red zone, it'll definitely get there. And I like the fact that it's very physical on your upper body as well. I think you can do some conditioning and it doesn't really attack your grip and things like that, whereas the rower is it's massive on your upper back and your grip. So which obviously transfers over to grappling or jiu-jitsu in the gi. So that's why it's my go-to.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the rower too. We got the rowing machines at the gym and stuff like that. And it's like, I don't know what it is. Like you said, there's just something about it. Like when you can get on that sucker and really like push it on the rower. It's kind of, I don't run as much, same thing as you. I don't run as much as I used to, just from the knees and stuff like that. And back when I was running for fights or something like that, if I could just book it like with a run, then when I was like on the mats, I felt like I had good wind. And then in lieu of that, like if I can get on the rower and I can really haul ass on the rower, then like when I'm on the mats, I'm fine. I feel like I'm good. You know,
Mate, that is exactly the same. Like I can't explain it at all. But whenever I'm in like a solid rowing block, grappling feels easier because I enjoy grappling. It's like when I'm tired grappling, it's like I've got some adrenaline. Like on the rowing machine, it's like,
oh, it sucks.
It gets dark. Like you're staring at a little screen and you're in the red zone. You're hanging out in the red zone. It's I think if you can put yourself through that, you can get in that same red zone on the mat with a little bit of adrenaline there as well. It feels a breeze.
Are you using like a heart rate monitor to kind of keep track of where you're at and where
I
you're trying to stay?
No, I don't. I have done that a little bit in the past, and I'm not sure. I don't like monitoring things too much. Like I'm the same with my food. I don't. When things start getting strict, like when I start cutting weight, and I don't know if it's something that I'm suffering with because I cut weight so much when I was doing judo.
Sure.
But as soon as someone says to me now, like you're counting calories and you're taking this many calories a day, it just feels too structured. Like I do live with structure, but in my own head, I kind of act like I don't. I think when I'm actually like counting all my calories, and then I used to do things on the rower where we go off an average watt. So we'd like look at like your max wattage when you in terms of your power output, and we do like a rowing test to get that score. And then like you get told like you have to do say like 10 500-meter efforts on the rowing machine, and your average power has to be this. But it would just drive me insane because like if I did 10 rounds in the morning and then I had that rowing machine session in the evening, and obviously I was tired from what I'd done on the mat and I couldn't hit that average wattage, I wouldn't be able to sleep. I'd be like, I could have hit that last week and this week I can't. I can't. There are little things like from getting older, I've kind of got a bit clever with them where it's like, it's the same with a strength coach. Like if a strength coach says, today you got to lift 95% on bench press. If I've done 10 rounds that morning, there's absolutely no chance I'm hitting 95% on a bench press that night. So it's kind of like, I've got a little bit clever in terms of what's being done on the mat is the absolute important session for that day. And then do what you can in the gym later on, basically. And yeah, it's the best I've felt for a while doing it that way.
Yeah, I think you've done it long enough to where you can listen to your body. You're still going to push yourself, but you're going to know what you're capable of and kind of what your body will tolerate. I see what you're saying. It's a lot of mental games you kind of play with yourself too, because if you're like, I can't reach this milestone or this wattage I'm trying to attain on the rower, then it's going to like mess with your head. And then
that's it. You leave a session, which was a good session, but you leave the session thinking, fuck, I just failed. It's just like, it's the worst way to leave a session. Like if someone taps me in a session, I'm not bothered. Whereas I'm getting off a rowing machine, which doesn't really mean that much, and it's absolutely ruined my day. So yeah, it's just a different outlook now. It's get the work done, but I kind of try and keep the scores out of it.
As far as your outlook goes, you had mentioned earlier on the podcast that when you were like from age 8 to 14, you didn't really win much in judo, and then you started winning.
Yeah.
Now, like, so kind of what was that like? Is that outlook kind of something you learned from that point, and then you kind of got better, and then is there something that changed for you when you were like 15 years old that you started winning and
Not
developing?
really, no. It's just like we trained like very often as kids, but it was like hard training, but there was still a fun emphasis in that as well, which I do believe is probably why I'm still doing it now. And I think I was built with a ton of kids around me from different gyms that were literally training like a professional athlete at 8 years old. So at that time, when it didn't really mean that much, these kids were on a better level than me. I basically kept going. And when I started getting to about 13, 14, I really started getting a feel that judo was what I wanted to do. So I started to do a few extra little judo sessions. Like, I got a really good coach coming over from Poland. He started working in the UK. And basically, he was just teaching judo in schools and sending money back to his wife in Poland. So basically, he had so much free time through the day that I just meet up with him and we would just be doing one-to-one judo sessions for like hour and a half a day. This is when I started to realise it's actually what I wanted to do. Then at 15, I started getting a little bit of help with my strength conditioning. So like in my lunchtime at school, I was really lucky because I went to what they call in England a sports college. So they emphasise people doing sports and they'll give you a little bit of support if you're doing sport. So they actually used to give me an extra 30 minutes at lunchtime, which meant I could go in the gym and do my strength conditioning, still get me lunch before I went back to class. So I just started to train a little more often, take things a little bit more serious, a little less fun in it when I was about 14. And when I say I started winning, like I literally mean just a medal. Like I just got silver in the British Championships that year. I didn't even become British champion. But the top 4 getting invites to the GB team. So I basically got my first medal after like 8 years of doing the sport, or 6 years of doing the sport. And then from there, that kind of gave me the hunger to take things more serious. And I never actually lost the British Championship after that. Then I won the next 2 at cadet, I won the next 2 at junior, and I won the next 2 at senior. So, yeah.
How'd you keep from getting discouraged? If you kept losing, well, what was like you just enjoying it? You didn't really care about winning and losing, or what was it?
I think at that time for me, I was still playing rugby. So it's like in my head, it was like, I've lost. Fuck judo, I'll go and play rugby. And then on Monday, I'd be back in the gym doing judo again.
Gotcha.
And then 4 weeks later, I'd compete and I'd be like, I've got a rugby game tomorrow anyway. I'd go and play rugby. And I just kept finding myself back on the mat. I wasn't taking anything too serious at that point. It was just a sport. I was just a kid, not really knowing where I wanted to go with it. And I was just turning up and enjoying the sport.
And maybe that's part of the secret or the magic there, because a lot of people come into things and they get a little ahead of themselves. They set big expectations for themselves and they take it a little too seriously, sometimes too fast.
Yeah.
And then when they don't reach immediate success in the beginning, then they get discouraged. Something I guess you could talk to your students about is like, could you do something for 8 years? Compete in it for 8 years and not win anything before you started winning stuff? Could you do that?
Yeah, it's a funny one because there's just like a lot of people here say like it's not who's best, it's who's left. I think there's a lot of truth in that. It's you look at the people that did well, like probably if you spoke to Chris, I don't know if he would have been like the best child when he first started. I'm pretty sure in America there's probably some American kid who'd smash him all over the mat, but he's stuck at it and look at the career he's had.
Yeah. It's a lot of the right elements, like you said, just kind of having fun with it, having good coaches, and then when it was time, I think you kind of, once you came around to meaning something to you, then you can, invest that energy into it. Because when your mind's kind of a couple different places, it doesn't hit you as hard if you lose, right? You just don't really care.
Exactly. I think what you said there, the good coaches is very big though.
Yeah.
I was very lucky. Like I didn't know which gym I was walking into, and I was just so lucky that the gym I walked into had a coach basically for judo, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu, and it ended up being a club, a very small town club, and it still produced 2 Olympians in judo. It still produced a Commonwealth medalist in wrestling. So, like, I was just very lucky that I walked into this gym. I do think now that the sport is getting so big, there is so many coaches out there now, and as good as it is that there's absolutely loads of good coaches, there's a lot of coaches that see that money can be made in jiu-jitsu as well. I think it's very easy nowadays, now that you can access instructionals, it's very easy to buy an instructional and go and regurgitate that information to someone that doesn't know what's good and what's bad.
Sure.
And you can make a business out of it pretty easily, I think. So I think you have to be very lucky when you walk in that first gym, or do your research now and make sure that coach you're starting with isn't going to be giving you some bad habits.
What do you look for? Like, I mean, or even like, how are you as a coach now? Or what do you look for if you have a student or someone asking you, like, what do I look for in a coach? I don't know if my coach is any good.
Mate, I just say research me. Like, I think now you can find anything on Google. You know what I mean? I think you can find pretty much anything on Google now. I think you type someone's name in Google, it will come up what they've done as an athlete or done as a coach, or there'll be something in there, or who they're graded under. Because I'm definitely not one of these people that say like a good coach has to have been a good competitor, because that's been proven that although there's definitely good things that come out of the coach being an ex-competitor, I've seen bad coaches who were phenomenal competitors, and I've seen great coaches who weren't very good competitors. But I do think, like, do your research, see what they've done as an athlete, see if they've produced anyone, or see who they're graded under. I think, and like where they've actually come from, like what their base is and what they're going to be passing across.
For sure. Awesome. Well, so March 11th is your match against Chris Weidman at the Polaris show. Do you have a prediction, like anything you kind of see that you might be able to do, or like maybe anything from him that you're looking for?
Mate, I literally just grapple the same against everybody. So I'd love a wrestle with Chris. I know he's a good wrestler as well. So
Yeah.
I just hope for a good match, mate. I always want my matches to be entertaining, whether I win or lose. I want it to be a match that the people have paid to go and watch. I want them people to leave and say, fuck, I'd go and watch that guy again. So I just hope for an entertaining match, and I'm pretty sure it should be.
It should be. That's a good style matchup for you guys, because I mean, I could be wrong. I don't foresee Chris pulling guard. I see him trying to wrestle, and then for you, I mean, like, that's one of your strong suits is your stand-up game. So, and that's something that no matter what anybody says, you know, everybody, you could love leg locks, you could love guard pulling and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, like, you know, the takedown battles are exciting. Watching guys like really fight have a beautiful foot sweep or some beautiful throw or takedown, those are exciting points. And so I think you guys are a great style matchup to make a good match.
Yeah, I think as well, with there not being no leg locks, it takes a lot of. I think some people you grapple against now are so good at leg locks that you've kind of got to be careful the way you pass, and you got to be a lot more cautious. Where we've took leg locks out of it now, there's absolutely nothing holding us both back from going 100% after it. To be fair,
did you mention, is it no points, just submission only?
No points, no. So it's submission only. And then basically, if there is no submission at the end of 10 minutes, it's the person who's attacked the most submissions and been the most dominant positionally.
That's great. That's interesting. Man, Owen, thanks for your time, brother. We appreciate it. We'll and then you have a website, right? Can you share that with us real quick?
Yeah, it's Owen Livesey grapplingacademy.com. So basically, I just throw a lot of content up there from when I'm teaching in my gym, and if I do any seminars anywhere, they just get recorded and get thrown on there. So there's a lot.
And then if anybody wants to follow you, are you active on any social media platforms?
Just my Instagram's the only thing I really use now, and that's just at Owen Livesey.
Okay, cool.
Very cool.
Brother, it was a pleasure talking with you, and good luck with you in your match.
No, thanks for having me, lads. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much.
So, guys, that is the podcast. That was a fun conversation with Owen. You know, one of the things that he said a couple times, he'd said that, like, you know, combat sports make you an honest man, make you an honest person, right? And I think there's some truth to that to some degree for me, because I think about this, right? Like, grappling itself, it's not something that any of us really need to live. Like, you know, you don't need grappling to live. Like, you will be fine. Like, if you never grappled a day in your life, and again, you would still live. But for some reason, we enjoy doing it, and all the lessons that, and again, I always say this, there's a caveat to it. Grappling and sports and everything else do not make you a better person, but within them, there's options for you to become a better person if you want.
There's room for growth, for sure.
There's room for growth if you want it.
Exactly.
Right? If you want it. And so I think for those of us that are seeking that, right, you have all these different things that you have to deal with in grappling that then translate over to life off the mats, right? So for instance, being able to just eat it a little bit in the beginning and just get something going, that's something we all have to do. Like, let's say if you're starting a business, going to have to eat it.
Yep.
Let's say that you've got like you're juggling a family, work, and all these other things. You got to eat it for a little bit until you get things going. It's very normal, but you have to do it in those situations on the mat. Courage. I mean, how many times in jiu-jitsu are you from the day you step on the mats and you're nervous as can be because you're afraid for your first class to stepping out on a competition and you're facing some big dude who's like a hulking monster.
Yeah.
And you have to face these challenges that kick up anxiety in your body. And you have to simply say, you know what? I believe in myself. And regardless of how it's going to happen, I'm just going to see this challenge through. Courage, right? So you could develop courage in these situations. And where could courage serve you in your life off the mats? Like everywhere.
Yeah.
And so there's these virtues that you can develop through combat sports that I think you can develop them elsewhere. But I think because of the physical threat to our being that is there in combat sports, I think it's so much stronger. You know, because again, yeah, sure, you're going to have courage to go out and play like a soccer game, 100%. Yeah. But let's say if you're stepping into an MMA fight, like this person could potentially kill you. It's probably unlikely that it's going to happen, but like the threat of physical damage and physical harm is there, and there have been deaths.
Yeah.
So it's like, man, you don't know what's going to happen. You know, maybe you just have to have to have surgery after. The physical damage is on the table.
Absolutely.
And that really kicks up some fear. Even going into jiu-jitsu, you're like, man, what if this guy slams me in my neck? These questions go through all of our minds and we have to quiet them. And you have to and you learn to believe in yourself. And so again, there's all these beautiful virtues that I think could be developed through jiu-jitsu. And at least for me in my life, they've really helped me out as a person, develop some of these things like discipline. Because again, discipline's not something you're born with. It's something you develop. It's very much a practice. You know, you develop that discipline muscle from doing things. You develop the ability to develop a sense of calm under uncomfortable circumstances.
Yeah.
And so I really he said that. And I was like, you know, again, there's a lot of meaning to that, but very much so I agree with that. It can make you that kind of person. Like, it doesn't have to, because there's lots of dirt bags that are involved in jiu-jitsu. But I think if you want that, if you want to become a better person, if you are striving to, like for me, I strive to achieve a higher ideal of who I am. I'm never gonna reach that ideal because it's way out there.
Yeah.
But it's something to strive for.
Yeah.
You know, and so jiu-jitsu is a mode for potentially trying to go towards that.
No, I agree. And I think you're teaching these skills, you're building resiliency, but you're also learning these skills, and you have to kind of wield these weapons that you get in a way that's responsible as well.
You should.
I think you should.
You should.
I talk to my kids. I was like, I always use the Spider-Man quote. Yep. So with great power comes great responsibility. If you learn a submission or a choke and you don't respect, you know, the strength of that and the capacity that you can do damage, you know, you can kill a kid, or just, you know what I'm saying? You could hurt them and worse. So you have to really be mindful. And so I think like you have to, I think certain caliber of person should learn these things, or you can even develop into the person that you want to become through jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
When maybe you've been someone that has never had a skill or never been good at anything or hadn't been able to defend yourself, and now you can. Are you going to turn into the bully, or are you going to be the person that kind of like the protector, or, you know, the helper? So
right. Well, that's the thing too, right? Because it's like, you know, you talk about Spider-Man. So like, you know, you look at Spider-Man and you look at Venom.
Yeah.
Right. So he gets the power and then he turns into a crazy person misusing the power.
Sure.
And I mean, I can tell you that I've met plenty of people who got into like combat sports, like fighting and stuff like that, and they misuse their power.
Yeah.
Like, you know, some of us, like we try to avoid fights. We try not to fight. We will do everything we can not to fight. But if we've got to fight, we'll take care of it. But then I've had other people that I knew, even friends, who, you know, they would be out at bars or whatever, and they would purposely, you know, they wouldn't maybe necessarily pick a fight, but they wouldn't go out of their way to calm things down. And if anybody did anything, they would ramp it up to 100% just because they knew, like, these people can't do anything to me. Yeah. Like, it's like basically like you're basically, I mean, because again, if you've gotten to a point where you're like a fairly good, like, let's say mixed martial artist, if you go fight some regular person, like hand to hand, which again, most of the time I understand guns, weapons and stuff like that. But, for any of you that have ever actually been in a fight out of the mats, most of the time it never goes to that. Most of the time it does sometimes, right? But most of the time, most people, they're just drunk and stupid and they're going to scrap a little bit. Well, they don't stand a chance.
Sure.
It just don't. They're like, I mean, it's laughably easy most of the time, especially if you're a skilled fighter. And so they know this. And so they get to be, like you said, be a bully. Oh, come on, man, let's go. Let's fight. Yeah, let's do it. And then they go out there and they can leg kick the guy, they can foot sweep them, and they can do all kinds of mean things to them just because like they can. And again, so these things don't necessarily make you a better person, but I think that there's the ability to learn from them and to potentially, become a better person.
Absolutely.
And so, anyway, I had a great time talking to Owen. So hopefully you guys had a good time listening to it. Again, thanks to our sponsors for helping make this podcast happen so we can come into your ears or into your visuals through the videos. If you watch the videos with the podcast, check out Charlotte's Web. Again, CBD company. They make great stuff. They're one of the few CBD companies that I know of that really try to go through stringent testing processes for their products. CBD is a unregulated supplement, which means who knows what's in that stuff. Again, if you get a bottle of CBD, they've done some different studies and tests where it could be right on the money that what's in there is in there. But in a lot of cases, these kind of fly-by-night companies will produce a product, and there is a wide array of variables there of stuff that's in there that shouldn't be in there, stuff that should be in there that's not in there. And so that's not ideal. If you're taking a supplement, you want to be able to count on, hey, whatever the bottle says is what's in there. And again, they are third-party tested. So they get their stuff tested, and they have a rigorous process from the beginning to end before it gets to you to make sure that what you're getting is a highly controlled product that you can count on. And again, if you want to check out their stuff, you can go to charlottesweb.com. My encouragement to you is check out their stuff. If you buy something, use the promo code Chewjitsu20 for 20% off. And then from there, try it out for a month, see what you feel. And if you enjoy it, you like it, continue. If you don't feel anything from it, no big deal. Trust your experience over anything that some bearded guy on a podcast says. But again, if you do like it and it does help you, well, then, just consider it a good recommendation from a friend. Also, guys, thanks to Epic Roll for helping make the podcast happen. If you are interested in getting some jiu-jitsu gear, merchandise, or apparel, gis, rash guards, shorts, t-shirts like the one I'm wearing right now and the ones that I wear pretty often, check out his website at epicrollbjj.com. My buddy Matt runs the website, makes a lot of cool stuff. And again, I mean, it's basically just that, right? It's a jiu-jitsu black belt who makes cool stuff for jiu-jitsu practitioners. So if you want to check out this stuff, go to epicrollbjj.com. The promo code to support the podcast and save some money is Chewjitsu, CHEWJITSU, 15% off the order. And you can pick some nice stuff up. And also thanks to our sponsor, Manscaped. They just released their Beard Hedger, I think is what they call it. I keep forgetting the name. They've got like fun names to everything, but the Beard Hedger. They just gave me the Pro Kit, so I'm going to check it out. I just got it, so I'm going to take it home and try it out. But I like it already because it's got this adjustable dial, so I don't have to mess around with guards or anything like that. And they have some products that I've never tried before. I'll let you know how it goes. Again, for any of their stuff I've used, it's all been top-notch, high-quality stuff. So if you're a man who is, again, trying to look nice, smell nice, whatever, be more well-groomed, go to their website at manscaped.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off the order, and you get free shipping. Again, it's a good deal, and they've got really nice products, and so check them out. And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Again, along with a snippet from every podcast where we have a question answered by the guests that are on the podcast, including Owen that we had today. We also have a little bonus set of videos that we give away. One is a seminar series that I did, gi and no gi seminars, and one is a stretching warm-up routine that Eugene put together. I share this one and I talk about this stretching routine every time we're on the podcast. The reason being is because so many people ask me like, what I should be doing for stretching? And again, it's a stretching / strengthening routine because there's a couple exercises that are like where you're activating certain muscle groups like your hips and stuff like that. But if you're someone that sits a lot if you're someone that trains a lot and you don't do anything to offset any of that, and you sit a lot too, like modern day living, like most of us do, those can create a lot of issues with your shoulders, your hips. And again, it can lead to a lot of tightness. And that can also lead to a lot of long-term problems, injuries, things like that. So something that you can do to help avoid that tightness or those injuries down the road is to help strengthen certain muscles, loosen certain muscles up. And again, his 20-minute routine is not going to be the end-all be-all, but it could give you it could kind of get you going on the path to where like, oh, you can feel things loosen up and have some results and then kind of go from there. And so I encourage you to check out the Patreon. And again, once you join up, you'll get access to that along with the other loads of content that we've produced. And I think the stretching routine for most people is worth it's worth the money, right? I mean, it's inexpensive anyway, but that right there, I mean, it could save you on the mats. It could help loosen up your muscles, could help improve mobility and range of motion and prevent injuries. To me, like a couple bucks, it's kind of worth it, but it's up to you. So check it out at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And guys, last but not least, I do a daily email newsletter where I give you an idea to chew on. That's kind of what I say in it, because in an email, I can't teach you a technique, but I can give you an idea to think about, something to think differently about, an idea to consider. And again, thousands of people read the email every day. And again, if you would like to join them, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. And upon joining, you'll get access to some free ebooks that I put together, some free guides and things like that. Some of them are on drilling for jiu-jitsu, some of them are on game plan stuff. And again, they're very useful stuff that I found useful that I shared. And again, you get those for free upon joining. You can unsubscribe at any time, and I won't spam you, but I will send you a daily email that you will get from me. So anyway, guys, that is the podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you had a good time listening to Owen. Make sure to check out his match coming up in March 11th at the Polaris show.
Yeah,
and
against former UFC middleweight champion
Chris Weidman.
Yep, Chris Weidman.
That should be an exciting one, because you got two guys that are going to want to stand up and trade takedowns with each other and fight takedown battles. And so I'm excited to watch it. So I'll be watching, and you guys should too. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll talk to you next time.